Fair Territory's out there right now. Let's charge the damn mound with Ken. Okay, Ken, Scherzer's gone over the weekend. Are we going to hear a Justin Verlander trade scenario pop up where he's going to have to decide on a no trade clause that he would ditch?
My guess is yes. And the reason I say that is because of his reaction yesterday after he pitched, earned his 250th win, and said, like Scherzer said the other night, he wanted to hear more about the organization's direction. And it seems that if you trade one, why wouldn't you want to trade the other? Now, the difference is, actually, I'm not even sure this is a difference, but like Scherzer, Verlander has a full no trade. He might not want to go. We don't know his intentions, and we don't know if he feels the same way Scherzer did, if his family considerations are the same, different, personalities different. We don't know any of this. So there might be only one or two teams he'd be willing to go to. You hear this. You hear only Houston or maybe LA, Dodgers. Again, it's unclear what he would be willing to accept and what he would not, what his thoughts are regarding the team going forward. This all will play out over the next, 24 to 30 hours, and we're going to find out. But I do believe the issue will come to a head and that he will be presented with a trade possibility.
So does this mean the Mets are now in on Ohtani, that they got rid of Scherzer and it's possible they could get rid of Verlander? Or is this just a, hey, this is what we got and we have an opportunity to better a farm system that's low?
It seems right now, Eric, that it's the latter, that they want to reposition the money in a different way. And with the Scherzer deal, they used the money, some of it, to go effectively buy a prospect, Luis Angel Acuna. They could do the same thing with Verlander. I guess they could take a different approach as well to get prospects back, or I don't know, it could be anything. But I don't know that this is laying the groundwork for an Ohtani move, because keep in mind, with Scherzer, they are still paying approximately $36 million over the next 2 years. That's money that's charged against their luxury tax payroll. And with Verlander, it might be a similar scenario. Obviously, Steve Cohen does not seem to care much about these financial limitations and restrictions, but does that mean if he's getting rid of these two guys, he's simply going to go get another guy? I don't know. It's unclear at this point what exactly their direction is. You heard Billy Epler say yesterday, it's not a fire sale, it's not a liquidation. We'll know at 6 o'clock tomorrow night if it was indeed as he described it or if it was something else.
Well, Ken, if why get rid of Scherzer if you're not going to get rid of Verlander? Now, I'm sure you heard me say that when we were in New York together that I was told Verlander doesn't want to go and Scherzer wanted out. So that's played out. But who else can the Mets trade? Because they don't have a ton of value. We've talked about this before. But if they're going full fire sale, yeah, Verlander would be nice. But then they still have these contracts on the book. They have Lindor still. They have all these other guys. They have Alonso. They have all these other guys that are still on the hook. So can they really reset the payroll just with Scherzer and Verlander and paying down all this money? Because they got one player back. Now, I heard he's a good player, but they only got one for Scherzer, and they had to pay a ton of money. So it seems like, yeah, it sounds great on paper, but is this realistic for them to turn the organization around in one trade deadline?
I don't know that that's what they're trying to do, AJ, and we don't know what their plans for 24 are just yet. I wrote today that if they're going to trade Verlander on top of Scherzer, okay, but their preference has been starting pitchers on shorter-term deals with higher average annual values. That's the way Cohen and Epler have operated. That's what they've wanted to do. If you trade those guys and you want to compete in 24, then you've got to go back into the free agent market for, if not Shohei Ohtani, Julio Urias, Aaron Nola, Lucas Giolito, Eduardo Rodriguez, Marcus Stroman. Name a free agent starting pitcher. There are a number of good ones who will be available this winter, and they're all going to want longer deals. So that would require the Mets to adjust their approach on starting pitching in free agency. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But right now, guys, you're asking me all the right questions. I don't have the answers, but the deadline will reveal truths. It always does. And I expect by 6 o'clock tomorrow night, we'll have a better idea of what exactly is happening.
Ken, I know you wrote with Dennis Lynn of The Athletic about the Padres and their situation over the weekend. Well, nice weekend for them. They sweep. They're one of those game-to-game situations. Now that they're 5 games out of a wild card spot, and there's still so much talent on this roster, do you think they're going to do anything, whether it's buy or sell?
I would expect, if anything, it's buy. But at the same time, Scott, and I mentioned this on Fair Territory, which is out right now, the Padres are capable of anything. They have proven that under general manager A.J. Preller and their owner Peter Seidler in the last few years. They've repeatedly shocked us and done things that maybe make your head scratch a little bit, or you scratch your head, but then you kind of hear their explanation and you might not agree with the logic, but you see the logic. I would not be surprised by anything they might do, whether it's trading Snell or Hader, Snell and Hader. It doesn't seem likely or possible at this point, but maybe they trade one to get some other piece that they want, prospects that they want for something else. There are all kinds of things and ways that they can go about this. The most prudent course, it would seem, would be to simply strengthen this team. It needs depth, position player side especially, pitching side as well. That would be the way to go, because if you look at run differential, if you look at playoff odds, these all point favorably for the Padres. So a sell doesn't make sense. Even a modified sell doesn't make sense unless they're getting something to help this year's team.
But if this year's team needs something, where do they look at? Because this year's team has just been underperforming on the field. So are they going to take some of those guys who they're saying, well, we did sign you to this, but now we're bouncing out of that?
No, what they would do, I would expect, Eric, would be prospects. And they have never, A.J. Preller has never been afraid to trade prospects. So, again, if they're getting lesser guys, depth guys, I guess you would describe them, that's not going to cost you a ton in prospect value. So that maybe is the way to go. But A.J. Preller, we've seen this time and time again, guys. You got to follow history a little bit, right? He is a big swinger. So that is why I don't necessarily anticipate or try to anticipate anything with him, because it's impossible to.
Ken, I know there's a lot to keep up with the deadline, but have I missed the Baltimore Orioles doing something transaction-wise over the weekend? Did I miss something, or are they just sitting around like they did in the offseason when they have a clear-cut need and a ton of prospects, and maybe this is their best window to win? We don't know.
Well, they have added Fujinami to their bullpen, so that's one. They did not do anything over the weekend, Scott, and you're right. As the deadline approaches, we are still waiting. They just demoted Tyler Wells, one of their best starters in the first half, and it kind of points, again, to their urgency with regard to their rotation. They have younger, less experienced pitchers who are all dealing with innings limits and fatigue, that kind of thing. Grayson Rodriguez looks great, but he's past his career high in innings, and who knows how long he can pitch at this effective a pace. So they need a starter. We've known this for a while. We've known, as you said, they have prospects galore, duplicates in many positions. I do expect them to do something. There is not an excuse if they don't do anything this particular deadline, but I'm not willing to judge any team until 6 o'clock passes. And even then, obviously, trades cannot always be judged instantaneously. But with regard to the Orioles, they clearly need to add, and I would like to see them add, but we'll see what happens.
Ken, who in the division? We saw, you mentioned Fujinami. He pitched great last night against the Yankees. The Yankees are last place. What do they do? And then the Orioles passed the Rays in that division. What do the Rays do? Do both these teams need to make moves to bolster their team? And have the Yankees just given up? Because everything you read is, we're not going to do anything.
I don't know if they've given up, AJ. I wouldn't put it like that. I just don't expect them to do anything dramatic because, as I said on the Fox broadcast Saturday night, they have not proven worthy of another investment in prospects or in payroll. You don't trade prospects, big prospects, in a position like they're in, the way they've played, and you don't add payroll when you've already spent almost $275 million. So I would be surprised if they did something really big. You never know, obviously, but they're not in a position to go much further beyond where they are right now. The Rays, yes, they are looking for pitching. They're much like the Orioles. They want to add to their rotation, bullpen depth as well. It's not easy right now. There aren't many starters available at reasonable prices in these teams' minds. We've seen some starters go for some big prices so far. Giolito, Montgomery, Scherzer, even though the money was involved. So I expect the Rays will be active and make some moves, but at the same time, it's a lot of teams in the same position. The Reds, the Diamondbacks. I can name others. The Dodgers, my goodness, they want pitching. They had the highest ERA in July, second highest in club history for a single month. So there is all this demand, not enough supply, and that is what we are facing right now. It's this crossroads with the few hours left before the deadline.
if the Orioles don't make a move, are we going to look at the Angels and say the Angels priced the Orioles out of the market because of overpaying, and they're just like, I don't want to get rid of any prospects?
It's a fair question, Eric. And yes, one deal does influence another. And the price has risen, I would say, based on some of the returns so far, the Giolito one in particular. But at the same time, I always kind of just don't feel much empathy for teams that say, oh, we got priced out of the market, or teams that say, these guys are holding us up. They haven't made a decision here. And there's nothing we can do. We're all waiting. The industry's waiting. No. You're all on your own. 30 teams. You can all do what you want and when you want it. So if the Orioles get priced out by their estimation, well, they didn't act soon enough. And they can say then, well, we couldn't act quickly because teams weren't ready to move. But no team owes any other team anything in this circumstance. If the Angels decide they want to overpay because they're going for it in Shohei Ohtani's potential last year with them, that is their absolute right. And the rest of the industry has to deal with it, then they have to deal with it.
Hey, Ken, I'll mix in one fan question here asking about the Cincinnati Reds, because they're obviously right in the thick of it in the Central, and even potentially now in the wild card with a lot of those teams kind of coming down and it being very muddled in the middle there. So what do you think the Reds could do? And have you heard or seen any activity so far with them? Probably focusing on starting pitching, I would imagine, right?
It's funny. I didn't name them just now as one of the teams looking for starting pitching, but yes, they are one of the teams looking for starting pitching. What I'm told with them, and this can always change, is that they're really reluctant to part with their better prospects, even some at AAA right now, for rentals, because they feel those prospects, the guys who are close, are going to help the big league club this year. And they've got Hunter Green coming back. They've got Nick Lodolo coming back. They might be okay from a starting pitching perspective. I don't buy it. They still need starting pitching and a veteran to be at the top of that rotation, ideally. The prices are high, and this is another team that they didn't expect to be here this quickly, perhaps. But they are going to try. Whether they accomplish anything, that remains to be seen, because they are reluctant in that regard. Just what I said. Close to the big leagues, they're not really willing to trade that kind of player for a rental.
Hey, Ken, how much do teams – have you seen the website or Twitter thing that's trade value, whatever? I don't forget exactly.
Yes.
How much do teams look at that? Because I see like Lucas Giolito is a minus 0.7 something, and then they trade for like a AA catcher, and he's like $20 million player. And you're like, wait a minute, Lucas Giolito is a proven big leaguer. This guy's AA hitting 200. So do teams look at that, or do they have their own values?
Teams have their own evaluations, and their own valuations, I should say. And it's funny, AJ, you mentioned that, because after the Scherzer trade, I started asking some people in the game, okay, how do we value Luis Angel Acuna? How do we value Scherzer? Why $36 million? Neither of the teams involved would really answer that question. I'm not even sure there is a specific scientific answer. But what I was driving at was Acuna's value. How much is that prospect worth? Now, it's not $36 million, because Scherzer is part of the package too, right? And he's valued at greater than $0. But teams do have their own systems and their own dollar signs that they put on players. They don't necessarily mirror that website's. They probably don't in some cases and do in others. But that is how they go about it. And yes, it's very specific.
Great stuff, Ken. Appreciate the time. I know it's crazy. Back to biz, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Ken Rosenthal's Fair Territory is up there for you right now. You can check it out on YouTube. Very, very relevant time period here.